Which creepy urban legend turned out to be true? The ghost squirrel in my hometown of Dorking, UK. There was a ghost squirrel called Albie that was only ever seen in the graveyard at the church in town. Turns out it was an albino squirrel that had a nest in one of the trees in the graveyard. Unfortunately, he became roadkill a couple years back. Out here in Washington there were rumors of a fairy house in the woods somewhere. One park ranger decided to go hunting for it and he actually did find a tree house in the woods. When he looked inside he found a ton of child pornography. He took it down and came back a while later and found it had been put back up. How dumb would the person have to be to put it back up again in the same place? I live near a lake and there was an urban legend that there were huge lake monsters near the hydroelectric dam. Most people thought it was just some fishermen's tall tales. We all guessed it was just a twist on the classic The One That Got Away. Turns out divers went into the water behind the dam for a routine inspection to see if there was any damage after months of heavy flooding in the area. Apparently one of the divers got too close to what he originally thought was a large moss-covered rock boulder until it moved and tried to latch onto the diver's arm. Apparently there are ± 200 lb catfish behind the dam which thrive on the dead fish that go through the hydroelectric portion of the dam. The agitated water makes it easier for the large catfish to breathe and grow past what is commonly found in the area. And the lack of fishes as all commercial fishing is banned for at least 1,000 meters means these fish are truly free to grow to truly enormous sizes. We all joke that our middle school PE teacher was a pedophile. He got arrested a few years ago for taking pictures of the female students and trading them for child PRN. Not really a legend. Unless you didn't believe it. My town and surrounding area has multiple old pirate smuggling tunnels under it. Going from towns to beaches. Most of the tunnels are under pub or shop basements. Also when I say pirate I do mean pirates. Penzance. Not creepy. But in my small rural hometown, there was a rumor that a bunch of city officials, cops, teachers, business owners, etc. basically anyone a kid would see as an authority figure, had massive orgies. Obviously as you grew up you came to your senses. Until one year when a teacher's husband stomped the absolute tea out of a local business owner in broad daylight. Turns out the legend wasn't just a legend. His wife was apparently a member of what was called the Hot Tub Club and he wasn't invited. A good chunk of local leaders got outed as hosting orgies somewhat regularly. I'm more surprised it was kept secret as long as it was. It was only a legend for like a week. But a kid went missing on the same property we lived on and everyone thought his brother had something to do with it but police said no. He was kidnapped. Turned out the brother had killed his brother and buried him in our backyard. It was only a legend for like a week. Oh. Something childish and light-hearted. We had an older couple that would come into the store I worked at when I was 15. They clearly had mental health problems and the rumor was they were siblings and the two teenage girls with them were their children. About 5 years later I'd find out someone had called the state about them and turns out, from what I remember, to be mostly true. The parents were apparently the result of incest and they carried on the family tradition. As it were. I think the state removed their daughters and put them in state custody since they weren't able to take care of themselves. And I don't remember what happened to the parents. I understand the McPoyle bloodline is very strong. In my hometown there was a local legend about a man who would sometimes be seen having sex with trees. Some called him Mr. Woodcock but he was more commonly known as the tree shagger. Though it must be nonsense but one night a friend and I were out walking his dog along a narrow, tree-lined lane we heard a grunting sound from the undergrowth. And there he was. He was wearing a long overcoat which had wrapped around a poor innocent tree and he had his trousers around his ankles as he defiled the shrubbery with a flagrant disregard for splinters. Considering all the animals, children, and adults that get molested by duck whistles all the time, I'm glad to hear of just one pervert who molests trees instead. I'm always late to these things. In Kenya, Mombasa, there was a story about a woman with long black hair and a white dress who would be seen around the beach at night, and it was to stop people from being at the beach swimming in the ocean. Turned out to be true, as older lady would sleepwalk on the beach in her 90s. Even she didn't know until locals found the courage to follow her home. When I was young, living rural Ontario, we were told as children not to wander too far into the forest, saying that a monster would get us and we wouldn't come home. If anybody knows who Rochthrialt is, that actually turned out to be painfully true. I often wonder if Stephen King's Children of the Corn was based on a northern town in Maine. I don't recall the name of the town, but my friends and I stopped in on our way to the furthest US point east. The town struck me very weird because every store clerk was like 14-17 maximum. Not just one or two stores every store. Aside from ourselves, we did not come across one adult in the 2 or so hours we were there. It was a depressed town. Nearly a ghost town, and left me with a really unsettled feeling. Black Vulgar. In the 60s and 70s, there existed an urban legend in Poland that vampires in black limousines were kidnapping people, preferably little children. It was a tale parents told their kids who would then tell their friends, etc. Turns out it was a rumor that was spread by the Polish secret police, who actually used black cars to kidnap people. The aim was that no one would believe someone who would report they had witnessed a kidnapping. The asylum lake tunnels in Kalamazoo are real. There is a small lake and wildlife area just off of WMU's campus, and for a long time there were rumors going around that they were still there and accessible. Well, turns out that was true, and there was an old set of stairs that was partially buried that lead to a walled up tunnel entrance. A few people used hand tools and ended up breaking part of the wall down and got inside, only to find the tunnels fully intact, albeit a bit damp and murky. Somehow the authorities got wind and went and sealed the entrance again, but it's still very obvious where that was if you are really looking for them. Welcome to the World of AIDS is an urban legend about a man meeting a woman at a bar, going back to his place to sleep together, only to have him wake up to her being gone and the famous slogan "Welcome to the World of AIDS" written on his bathroom mirror. The urban legend has many different variations. It was just a parable about casual sex and risk. This was largely considered an urban legend. That is, until stealth posing actually turned out to be a very real thing. Modern actual cases involve a British man named Daryl Rowe, who, already knowing he had HIV, would send a text after sex to his many victims saying things like "I have HIV lol. Oops, and I'm riddled." Others have also been convicted for knowingly doing this on Craigslist. Creepy Pete that used to hang out in the kids pool every Saturday at the leisure center actually turned out to be a pedo. He got arrested a couple years ago. When we were little, the kids in the pool would swim through his legs and the parents would just laugh. Pedos were basically urban legends back then. Way too true now. Not really an urban legend, but a fish cafe in my hometown says that its supports are made out of whale bones. Turns out many years ago a whale got stranded on a nearby island and died, and the owner took some rib bones and used it as arches for his business. That creepy old guy living down the street was actually the Golden State Killer. Sewer alligators. If alligators and other animals are flushed or disposed of into plumbing, yay, they can survive and hang out. In Liverpool, kids are taught about Purple Archie from a young age. He's been locally known and feared for honestly 3 decades. He likes feeling boys' muscles and makes them do squats. He's completely real. He's even had court orders against him preventing him from feeling people's muscles. I hope you get tarped by Purple Archie as a common insult. And a very real fair. The guy who boarded a plane at LAX for Oakland and found himself headed to Auckland. Cropsey. Sort of like the Boogeyman of Staten Island. During the 70s and 80s, kids on the island would go missing and the urban legend would attribute it to Cropsey. As it turned out, there really was a crazy kidnapper and serial killer who was responsible. He was caught and convicted. There is a great documentary about it, used to be on Netflix. Not sure if it still is, called Cropsey. Check it out if you get the chance. Raymond Robinson. The Green Man. Dude lost his eyes and nose and wandered the streets at night in Pennsylvania because he couldn't go outside in the daytime because of how he looked. People saw him and an urban legend in PA was born. Edit. Grammar. Just saw 3 commenter in a row about Purple Archie. Guess I won't be going to Liverpool anytime soon. The Wyckoff Wanderer. Wyckoff. NJ. The myth was that an old man would wander the streets at night looking for his daughter who got hit by a fire truck or ambulance. Can't remember. Anyway. Me and my friends were in high school driving home and we ducking see him. We pull over and start a conversation with him. I don't remember if we asked about his daughter or whatever, but turns out he had a light sensitivity so he only walks at night. He offered me a cigarette. Rolly. Which I took, but I don't smoke. Really nice guy. So I live in a small town in central Sweden. And I used to know this old guy that dated a younger woman from Thailand. Tragic thing is, their house burned down, killing the man. Now his son, Miss Thai was not the mother, told us about the remains the cops had found. Only one thing. His heart. No bones. Or anything else. So the son did some research on God in Thailand and apparently there is a demon that leaves only the heart behind. The woman inherited all of his money, his car and RV, and rebuilt a new house where the old one stood. Also, yay, she still lives there. For the last several years in Toronto, gay men have gone missing in the village. The community was convinced it was a serial killer on the loose. But the police said no. These murders disappearances are unrelated. Turns out that's totally the case and the guy was killing gay men, dismembering them and burying them in and around the properties he was working at as a groundskeeper landscaper. There were abandoned tunnels below my town. A large part used to be a self-sustaining mental institution covering several square miles. Everyone talked about them. But no one ever talked about actually being in them. Went spelunking in the woods and found an old maintenance shack. There was a basement that was flooded. Went back a couple years later when there was bad drought. Basement has a rusted door leading into said tunnels. Nothing special. And no escaped crazy people. I lived in the desert and went to school near Death Valley. We had 2 urban legends. Both turned out to be true. First was a man that got lost in the salt flats in Death Valley was found mummified a few days later. Apparently heat plus salt will do that to you. Talking with one of the rangers that was there said he could hear the bones rattle when they carried the body. The second one was more fun. Apparently the Manson family used to sell drugs to the students at the school I went to. Neat stuff. In Sao Paulo there is as in never got caught a ducker that injects random women with an unknown substance using a syringe. That big guy that likes to feel other dudes' muscles. What do they call him? Purple Archie. We had an old guy in our town who would park his white minivan, open up the back and play the spoons. He was really good at it and would play the spoons to whatever song was on the radio. Being in middle school, we all thought it was funny to joke that he was a pedophile. The pedophile jokes died shortly after and a year after I graduated high school. Spoon Man was still playing spoons, but last year he confessed to inappropriately touching a minor and was put in jail. Here is something to break your preconceived notions. Even people who commit terrible crimes can be pleasant and even downright likable. There is a local legend about a figure known as the Bunnyman. Supposedly the ghost of an escaped insane asylum patient who haunts a particular bridge. It is, as you can imagine, almost entirely horseshit. However, there is one report, allegedly, I haven't done a whole lot of looking, of 2 people who were assaulted in the area by a man wielding an axe, wearing what they described as a bunny costume that many people say was more likely to be clan robes. I told a friend this who was terrified of the Bunnyman. And she said, I think I'd take the murderous ghost over the murderous racists. So I guess maybe the legend of less scary than the truth. Bill Cosby. Gonna be honest, I think we've had video evidence of him for decades. Daisy's destruction. I highly recommend not looking into it too much. It was thought to be just some internet urban legend. But then the video allegedly surfaced in a couple of places. If the contents of the video are really as sick and twisted as what people say they are, then it makes me sad to be a human being. Edit. Since some of you want a basic rundown of what it is, you about a snitcher gave the perfect description that spares you from knowing too much. Guy produced child PRN so horrible people thought it was an urban legend. Don't be so cryptic because people will look it up. You are correct. I wish I had heeded your warning to not look it up. I'm mortified such a piece of amphibian sh*t classes himself as one of the human race. Absolutely duck and disgusting. Cropsy ended up being the real deal. There's an interesting documentary on Netflix about it just called Cropsy. All of this is making me feel privacy be damned. I want CCTV everywhere. It is unsettling though when you talk in your apartment about bacon being bad for you, not on the phone, no googling or emailing or texting about it, and you get an email about turkey bacon the next day. A lot of serial killers who hid the dead bodies before being caught were probably urban legends. Candyman the movie. How did that turn out to be true? I swear. So many people in this thread not even reading the question. Edit. I like to admit when I'm wrong. And you guys proved me wrong. I never would have guessed that movie had some truth in it. Turns out, Dingo really did eat her baby. Well, it seems the government really is watching everything we do. Also, no one seems to give a damn. In my city neighborhood when I was a kid, there was the Killer Clown. He was located generally daily above the elementary school grounds. A giant field with soccer areas and a hill on the side. Well, I went up there one day as a kid. And there he was, swinging in the swing at the top of the side hill. We stared at him for a bit and then ran for our lives when he got off the swing and started running towards us. One day, I remember walking by one of the play areas and there was a line of cop cars parked on this gravel rock hill road going up to the field. I think we all just assumed he was arrested. There's an urban legend about a thief stealing a suitcase containing a dead dog. In the 70s, my crazy artist aunt and uncle lived in Manhattan and their German shepherd died. Having the city come dispose of the dog was expensive. Lugging it up to the animal control office in the Bronx was cheaper. So they folded up the 50+ lb dog into a suitcase and headed for the subway. Except my uncle set down the heavy suitcase at a crosswalk while they waited for the light and a couple of kids ran by and snatched it. My uncle gave chase but obese alcoholics don't get far in New York in the summer. For years they laughed, speculating what those kids said when they opened the luggage. And I wonder again and again, were they the source of the tale? In the small town I'm from there was one homeless guy. He technically lived with his mother but wasn't there much. His nickname was Sweet Pea. He was a big dude and of course developmentally disabled. He used to wander the town at night. Totally harmless but there's always that better watch it or Sweet Pea will get you. Well, while he was wandering he used to go around to all the gas stations and collect the last little bit of oil left in all the oil cans in the trash. Everyone joked that he was actually rich from selling that oil. Well, when his mom died, they went to go clean her house out. And he had 10 55-gallon drums of oil in his garage. He was selling it and that's how they survived financially. It's too late in this thread for anyone to read this. But there's a serial killer targeting gay men in Pittsburgh. Gay men keep turning up in the river after they've been on the Grindr app. Look up Dakota James from Pittsburgh. The police won't release all of the CCTV because they don't want the hysteria. But yes, there's a serial killer here. It keeps happening. And no one is doing anything about it. Edit. My mom swears that the suicide by hanging mistaken for a Halloween decoration happened in my hometown. There's actually quite a few of those that have happened all over. One incident was featured on an episode of Cops. A man hung himself in a tree by an overpass. As it was days before Halloween he was overlooked as a prop prank for almost a full day before someone called it in and they cut him down. The spa in my tiny, Rural town actually was a covered Asian WH house full of human trafficked women. This was a rumor among everyone at my school. Every bit of it was true. They raided it in 2008. Rescued 4 women who spoke no English. And their boss, who was working with the human traffickers and basically acted as prison warden for those poor girls. They were all poor young girls from somewhere in Korea. Jimmy Savile. Heard many rumors about him being an old-style gangster and major pedophile. Years before it was brought to light. I always thought he was very creepy. His mannerisms would just make your skin crawl. It was one of those open secrets in the BBC apparently. Burger King foot lettuce. Nebula Mountain. Maybe 15 miles from where I grew up in East Tennessee. All the rumors say it's basically a hellish Appalachian hillbilly nest. And there are stories of trees felled on cop cars and flaming tires rolled at passers-by. Didn't believe it until a friend and I drove up one afternoon. We didn't see anything too unusual until close to evening when we had stopped to talk about what we were going to do next. When my friend looks past me out the window and says, "Holy shit," really softly. I turn and after a second of searching I see this young guy, shirtless, crouched by the road just looking at our car. When he sees us both looking at him he gets up, calm as hell, and just walks into the woods. We start to book it out of there and just as we come around the first bend down the mountain this giant rock barrels onto the road 10 or 15 feet in front of us. Then on down the mountain. The Catman of Green Oak. Sorry can't link on mobile. Source. Not sure if this fits exactly. But we all know weird shit happens in the backwoods middle of nowhere America. I know this sounds made up. And it's even surreal in my memory. But I recall these few details very vividly. Driving down a secluded road in Arkansas years ago while in college. Road trip with girlfriend at the time. We were driving later at night. It was past dark. Started smelling something strange. And as the smell grew stronger, we definitely saw a field off to the left with an outline of an upside down cross burned into the grass weeds, from the perspective of those on the road. I don't know if the smell was burning flesh, but I do know it was a guttural, disgusting, putrid, sick to my stomach smell. I chose to speed up and get to civilization quicker than planned. Not sure what was going on out there in the middle of nowhere. And I honestly don't want to know. Seems oddly dreamlike and very creepy thinking back on it now all these years later. GF and I never really talked about it after that. A woman who was from a local super rich family spent her whole life dedicated to the local mental illness population in a very poor town. The rumor was she was buried alive. When I was older my mom told me it was sadly a true story. The person she worked closest with put her in the ground to hide her in an attempt to extort money. They found her days later and the oxygen ran out.